Morning, Colleen.
Good morning. Hi, Nan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm
It's
so
nice.
excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, same here. And this is Joe Bauman, the illustrator of my book.
Hi,
Hi,
Colleen.
Joe.
And I know your illustrator is in a very different time zone. So
Yes, I actually did try to contact her, but it is midnight now where she is. She's in Singapore, so this was not a good a good time for her to hop on. But she was excited to get to share the book with you all.
yeah, it's a great book. I love reading it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came to write the book?
Sure. So I was an educator for almost 2 decades. I've worked professionally with kids as young as 2 up to adolescence in different settings. And most recently, I taught preschool for 12 years. And when the pandemic hit, my school went back in person, and my son's school, where he was starting kindergarten, was fully remote. So I had to make the choice to leave my in-person teaching job and stay home with him for that year of kindergarten. And while I was home, there was a lot of managing big feelings with him, and then also other children in our lives, and the children I was seeing on screen at kindergarten. And I knew that I had all these skills to help kids self-regulate and manage their feelings. And I really wanted to do something, but sort of felt, we were stuck home, and how could I help children in a tangible way? And the idea for this book came up. And it's actually based on our time home together and all of the things that we did really to help us, which was music and art, going out into nature. My son learned how to read during the pandemic, so books became a big part of his life for sort of an escape, playing sports. And so all these things that we had done to kind of help us, as I call in the book, flip our script when we were having our big feelings and find our own magic. I wanted to turn that into a book for kids. And I thought of a wolf pup because wolves are pack animals, right? So, we all sort of were wolves without our pack, right? We were separated from our pack. So Elvis is a wolf who's separated from the friends in his pack, and sort of how that felt and the way that he worked through his feelings. So that's how the story of how my book came to be.
Boy, still relevant 2 years later too, huh?
But yeah. And, thankfully it's translated, even though it's sort of the story takes place in the pandemic, people have said when they've used it with kids, child therapists and teachers, that, the big feelings are relevant. They're sort of timeless, even though that was the setting of the book.
Right. And the good news is there seems to be so much more awareness now of emotional regulation from so many different disciplines and so many different websites, and there's just so much more help out there. So this book just kind of fits in with the kinds of things that people are looking for, I think.
Yes, there was a real need. So you're right. I think the focus shifted. And, a lot of us that have these backgrounds in helping kids process these big feelings, in different occupations, a lot of us want to share our knowledge. And you're right. There's more resources now because there was a real need for it.
Yeah. And in my private practice as an occupational therapist, the need is so much greater now than it was before the pandemic, but especially for some reason, I'm seeing a more need for there's more referrals, and the kids are struggling more for sure than they were before the pandemic, especially the 4, 5, 6-year-old age group. They just don't have those experiences of working with other kids, playing with other kids. And so knowing how to manage those emotions when someone asks you to do something that's not familiar to you, that's what these kids are experiencing right now. And so there's a huge learning curve for them. So there are a lot of big feelings, doing hard things, feeling.
Yeah. And when you think about your age group, you said like the 4 to 6s. I mean, when at the beginning of the pandemic, they were toddlers, many of them.
Yeah.
So this experience, I taught preschool for so long, and that those first experiences of those play-based, in-person friendships, and how key they are to child development, that those kids, it's sort of, I guess, no wonder that you would have more referrals. But I'm interested in, so how did you decide to take all of your wealth of knowledge and turn it into a book?
Well, we had the idea a little before the pandemic started. So we had the luxury of a little more time during the pandemic, although we were still both working full time, to work on it. But I have been thinking, boy, wouldn't it be great if somebody could write a book about my work? And I didn't think that I had any experience or background or drive to do that. But it was a call from God to do it. And so I found Joe through my church and as an illustrator. And so we started working that way. And I actually wrote 3 books before contacting Joe. And then once Joe and I started working and trying to make the book actually a reality, I realized that's a lot of work. I need something faster. And so we ended up taking a little bit out of one of the 3 books and creating a story from that. And that's the book, Mission Control, A Big Feelings Adventure. So we have 3 that are the last 3 books. And then we have this first one. So we're bridging the first one to the other 3 that were already written. And so that's where we are right now, starting the second book, but we actually already have the second and third pretty well fleshed out. We just have to do the storyboards and doing all of the writing to go along.
Right. Well, I got to tell a short synopsis of Elvis. Tell us a little bit more about Mission Control, because once I got my hands on your book, I loved it. Me and my 6-year-old son, we really loved your book.
Well, that's great. I had a boy who came with an hour drive to see me yesterday, and the book came in the mail. And so they took the book with them on the drive.
That's so great. So by the time he got there, you were already somebody who, yeah.
It was perfect. And then I could share with the mom some of the ideas straight from the book. So it's pretty fun. And then she told me that he liked reading it all the way home too. So
nice.
Yeah, so it's fun to hear that it's valuable and helpful to people. And every once in a while I hear a parent will say, oh, your book came up last night in our conversation, or at bedtime or something like that. So it's fun that it's getting used. And the book is about a boy who does not want to go to bed. And again, like yours, it's a timeless thing. Like it doesn't have to be just bedtime. It can be all kinds of things that children don't want to do. And basically the children I work with, the things that they are struggling with is starting to do something they don't want to do, or stopping doing something they are already enjoying doing, or having a hard time accepting the answer no when they've made a request for something. So, that can be getting dressed, getting out the door, for getting shoes on, anything.
Transitions are so hard.
Transition. Yeah. But also just being able to hear, no, there's not going to be cookies before dinner or whatever it is.
Right. Or that something needs to stop in order for the next thing to happen. Right. Yeah, that's always a big one with kids.
Yeah. So Joseph in the book has a very difficult time being able to say, go to bed when his mom asks him to. So she helps him through some steps to be able to move forward. And when she gets him to sort of a calm down place, he can go into his imagination and solve the problem himself in his own imagination. But he's got his sidekick, Gretchen, his dog, who helps him through that. So she's the voice of reason. She's the one that is representative of his mom, who's just right there, present, connected with him, able to help him when he's ready for the help, but able to be just present with him when he's struggling. So he goes through a battle, an internal battle that he plays out in his imagination of, should I do what my mom asked me to do, or should I do what I want to do? So I think that's a battle, and that kids ultimately come around to, I do it because I'm supposed to do it. My mom is asking me to do it.
And I love Gretchen being sort of a sidekick of support. And I feel like that's often, kids and their pets, that can be a role that their pets really do play in real life too, right?
Yeah.
And Gretchen is based on a real dog. So.
Yes, we looked her up. My son and we enjoyed seeing the real Gretchen, and I think that's something. And that's something with my book too. Like often when I've done author events, my son is with me. for them. And when they learned the piece that this was based on our story, they'll be like, "You're the real Elvis," to him, which is really, it's funny and fun when there's that element of, Gretchen's a real dog. Kids really like that. Yeah, and I loved that whole sequence where he went with Gretchen, and the mom was there to attune to his emotions in the beginning, much like Mama Wolf is in my book. But then really ultimately, and this is one of my big goals, was to empower kids with this book, and I think you've done it as well, is that yes, we start out with the support of the mom, but then it's really up to Joseph and it's really up to Elvis to, regulate those big feelings and sort of get themselves back. And, teaching kids to do that, and that they actually are in charge of their big things. They can be, it's possible, I think is really empowering for kids.
Yeah, great message. Yeah, I agree, because they're at school and they need to be able to do that. They're at their friend's house,
Right.
they need to be able to do it, and they need to do it for life. It's a life skill.
Right.
So they need a lot of support learning about it, as you said, and then gradually being able to take over, and lots of practice with being able to do that. And a lot of practice also with problem solving. So that's, I think, with the more opportunities during the day that families have to do small problem solving with kids, it helps them feel empowered, like, oh, I can do this.
Right. Little, and once they feel that, they can kind of build on it. You know what I mean? I think it feels good. And then, making the choice that needs to happen, I think really feels more like their choice when you put it like that, or you give them these skills, tools in their toolbox. In my book, it's magic for your back pocket, and yours, it would be, like the gauntlet of the choices of what to do. Which I really liked, how I felt like your book gave kids really actionable steps, like takeaways that are really concrete that they could use,
Well,
so
go ahead.
Yeah, so how did you come up with that idea of like the gauntlet and the buttons to press of the different ways to self-regulate? I think that was powerful for kids. That was
and Joe drew it, and then I took the idea from that, like, oh, why not personalize it? And as an OT, it has a lot of the skills. It's got the cutting skills, it's got the writing skills and the coloring skills. And then putting all that together, I get to practice those skills with them, but also I'm adding in the emotional regulation piece. And that's been really fun to see what kids put down. I have a long list of things that I pull from if kids really need ideas of what to do. And some kids like to draw pictures of what they're going to do. You said your son did a gauntlet.
Yeah, so we tested this out, and just to show people what we're talking about. So here's the gauntlet in the book, right? That has all the different buttons of ways that Joseph kind of gets himself back. And my son made his, which he's got, he actually was wearing it yesterday.
Oh, that's so
with
good.
All of his, and he did choose a lot of the same ones that were in the book, but he added to give a hug, because he said, hugs help calm him down. And then he drew a little picture of him and I in a hug, because that's how he wanted to feel, like that feeling is how he wanted to end up. And I just thought that was such a concrete way that you gave, kids really actionable steps they can do in the moment. In fact, something happened here that, was like a moment of frustration for him in the process of us making it. And before it was even finished, he wasn't wearing it, but he ran over to the table and he pushed the breathe button and he was like, breathe. He sort of got himself back and fixed whatever the thing had, the dog had got into something or something. And then, I watched your work in front of my eyes, which was really fun.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And I've had, parents and teachers actually have talked to me about how Elvis and actually child therapists have also shared how kids have walked away with, those ideas in their head, and then they'll go home and be upset and draw their anger or do things in the book that, that Elvis had done. I think, that's why we showed up and wrote these books, right? Is that we want kids to have these things that they can do. right
And when
away.
they can relate to the characters in the book, that really helps so much. And
Yeah.
these books, I think, are very relatable to kids, and that's why we wrote them that way. Obviously, your son's experience is exactly portrayed, that the way you drew the pictures and the way the book is written.
Yeah, and I really wanted to get real about that experience of being home. And, if you look at the Zoom call that he's on for school, there's a wolf that has chips. There's one that's upside down. There's one that has a bunch of
I
siblings.
love that page. I love
Yeah, that
page.
page was really for kids, parents, and teachers, honestly. This whole
I'm gonna
thing
share
that
the
we
screen so we can see, because it's very cute.
had, yeah, and that was really a conscious choice. Oh, yep, there it is.
A little hard to see. I don't know if I can enlarge it. There.
I think
Yeah,
If you
it's
do
great.
this,
there you go. Yeah, so
Okay.
this was a scene that I really got real with, and I wanted it to be very real. And I think, anyone who was home doing remote school with children or trying to work from home, not just with children, but with anyone in your family home, right? We all were doing this. And, I wanted to show that frustration of what that felt like.
And you have another one too of what it's like for the dad. Did I pass it already?
I think it was on the same spread with the dad was working and telling him the same school spread.
right.
Yeah, there he is.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can really see that palpable feeling of what it feels like for Elvis to have his parents home, but not always available.
Right.
And, that was a big thing for kids too. It's like, not only are we all at the time where we stuck home, but many people were home with their parents, but their parents were working. And that was another piece of this adaptability that kids had to have, right? They had to, kind of do that. And I remember, there were times where my husband had to put up a sign on the door that he couldn't come in, and they kind of like developed a little system where he would draw him like comic book characters and, give him Post-its under the door sometimes, just to kind of stay connected, but also like really couldn't be. And I think that was another emotional piece for kids.
Yeah,
Be
that
home with kids who were, or with parents who were there, but not always available in a way that they wished they could be.
yeah, yeah. It's like having the candy sitting on the kitchen counter, but you can't eat it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
why can't you play, or why do I need to be quiet? I've been doing virtual school, and now you're telling me I can't run around and be loud, so I think, yeah, that was a really real thing that we all experienced. And I wanted to show it and to show how different ways that you could, sort of overcome it.
Yeah, and I love those illustrations. And then the other one I love is the one of the dragon.
Yeah, which that actually is his real, it's actually in this room. That was his real dragon that my son drew when he was angry. And my illustrator, she's amazing. She took it and put it in as part of the illustration. Yeah, so that was a real dragon that he had worked on when he was having big feelings, and we decided to put it right in the book.
Yeah, yeah. And then contrast, we've got the big feelings of Joseph too. Can you find it?
Yes. And I love how Rabojo sort of, mirrored those feelings. I have your book here, like when Rabojo's down. Oh, you have it there. There you go.
Those are big feelings.
Yes. And this, is so relatable to, I think I said this the last time we talked about how when kids, say those things that they regret, like, you're the meanest mom ever, in the moment, because they want things, and I have said this to you, and I'll say it again. I have used this share my calm since the day I got this book. I have said it almost daily in moments where it's like, share my calm, and it works.
And it's the first step to being able to move forward.
And I think it's something I did a lot as an educator too. I just didn't label it that way, but just to be present, and keep your cool and keep your calm, while children are sometimes exploding around you and having their feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I loved that so much.
Yeah, and even though it's really the first step to success, it's probably the hardest one, because the child will take the cues from you if you're in control,
Right.
but it's very, very hard to be
It's
in control.
very, very hard. And in those moments, you know, where there's, like I said, I taught pre-K for 12 years, and that's a time, like, it's kind of a roller coaster of emotions, right? Children are up and down all day, and that's when they're really figuring out their feelings. And when you have, you know, children who are really in it and upset, and it's hard to keep your calm, you know, and some, in those situations, you have many that might be at the same time, you know, having a
Yeah.
hard time.
Yeah,
And really keeping yourself, I mean, it really does work. You know what I mean? If the adults in the situation can, you know, sort of, and sometimes that means either stepping away for a second or tagging out with,
Yeah.
if there's another adult available. You know, I always had a peace corner in my classroom, right? With, you know, sort of a nice setup with lights and pillows and a basket of things to help self-regulate. Well, when the pandemic hit, my son was that same age as my students. He was in pre-K. We made a peace corner here. He has a loft bed, and we made one, set up one. I went to it just as much as he did, I think, in those beginning days. And it was like modeling that, like, okay, I need to go. And if I went there and just started using, you know, the calm down items that were in the basket, like, he would join me and we could kind of get back together.
Wow.
So it was like sometimes modeling, you know, the self-regulation is just as important as teaching it.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Kind of good to include it in a book. So some parents don't know that kind of stuff unless, like, my daughter's a teacher. She has like a reading corner with a bean bag, and it's very different than the rest of the room. It's like a canopy,
Right.
like lights in there. And so kids go in there and to read, but then it's like a special place where it's like, I don't know if most parents know, like, that'd be kind of cool to do that for your kid, to have a place where they can kind
It's
of,
their own space, you know, that's, and, you know, when we created ours, and I, you know, was at that point, I was still teaching virtually. So this was something that, you know, my team had done in our parent group on Facebook, because I was still teaching in March, when it first started, March 2020. And we said, you know, make it personal for the kids. Put things in the peace corner that they help you come up with, because just like Elvis and the letter I write to kids, these are the things that Elvis did to find his magic, but what makes you feel like you have your magic? You know, some kids, it might be drawing, other kids, it might be, you know, they might be more auditory and banging rhythm sticks or something, you know, whatever it is, or scarves to dance with, or music. You know, we have an Amazon Echo near his that he can turn music on because he loves music.
Yeah.
But, you know, really tailor it to your child. And if they have a buy-in and they help you set up with the tools to help self-regulate, you know, that means a lot. So that when they are in that space and they go there, it's like they, you know, they were part of it. They were part of kind of creating this little corner of peace.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wanted my book to, like, kind of feel like a peace corner, you know, like, feel like these are these things that you can do. But just like Joseph, you have to get there first with the big feelings.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, Elvis, when he's feeling as big, he feels like he's wearing a backpack of boulders, like he feels so heavy. And just like Joseph, when you see him screaming there at his mom, you kind of have to go there to get the kids to the other side.
Right, right. And then being able to process what happened, like narrate the story of what happened from the time those big feelings occurred to the time where in the book, Joseph is in bed and he says, mission accomplished. He's proud of himself.
Right.
That's a critical piece to helping kids learn how to do it differently next time. And
Right.
need someone who can guide them. So the intentionality by the parent and knowing, where do I want my child to go with this? How can I help them get there with the language that feels good? Like, oh, your brain grew from doing hard work of solving that problem and talking about the change from how it felt at the beginning and how it feels now, because he did the hard work. When it felt too much, he was able to think, well, there's a poster in his room that says, tomorrow I'll be a day older, tomorrow I'll be a more practice, and tomorrow doing hard things will be just a little easier. So that's
Right.
what parents are trying to get their kids to that point. Like, it was rough, but it's going to be easier tomorrow. And we all have experiences of doing things and we think, oh, this is so much work. Like
Yeah.
everything starting up with the pandemic, learning the Zoom and all of those pieces.
Yeah.
But like now we can do it with our eyes closed, setting up a
Exactly.
call and all of that.
Or even the process of writing a book and publishing,
That's
all
a
that,
big thing.
that was
Yes.
such a beast to take on, right? But we both got there, and yeah, I think teaching kids that, and teaching it to them when they're in the right space to receive it. I think sometimes people wait until the big feelings are here to try to teach these things.
Yeah.
But really it's about front loading kids with, if you read books like ours and similar, they kind of have these tools in their toolbox. And then, yes, you can pull the books out when they're upset and reread them to kind of remind them. But, if they have these skills, like even the first time we went to do the gauntlet, it was the end of the day, he was tired, and he wasn't in a good space to do it. And so I said, well, let's just leave all the stuff. We left the art supplies there. And the next day when he had, was kind of rested and stuff like that, I didn't even get to present it. He went back to it and he was already coloring it and doing it. And he was ready to, to be in that space to do it. And then they have the tools when they really need them, when they really, and to remember that, like, I can do this. I can go from being, so angry to like, okay, let me stop first. And,
Yeah.
but if you have a place where the things are there, like the art supplies, and, that they can pull out a clipboard, like in ours, we have clipboards and markers. It just makes it, environment is so important, right? Environment is always a huge teacher. I'm sure doing OT, that's, a huge part of what you do, right?
Right. Yeah, makes a big difference. Yeah. I was wondering, are you thinking about another book?
So I do actually have a sequel outlined. And I do have sort of backstories on all the wolves in the pack. You don't really meet them and have names in the book, but they do all have names and they sort of have backstories in my head. So I've thought of doing like little spin-off comics and things like that. As of right now, there's nothing in production. As books need funding. So that's like another piece of the puzzle. I was really fortunate to run a Kickstarter that was successful last time around. And that was how I was able to get the book printed so fast and do those things. So yeah, there's definitely ideas for, and not to give too much away, but if I was to do a sequel, I think the piece about when we all returned back together and how that was a little sticky, right? Like when kids got back to school and when they were back together working out things with their friends. And so they're there right now. Nothing is in place, but I'm excited to hear that you all have started working.
Yeah. So, part of the reason I asked that is because you and I have talked a little bit about some of the messages that are in common with our books, like mindset and perseverance. And we haven't really talked about fairness today, but that's in common with both of our books. And obviously the big feelings and the emotional regulation, just sticking to something that's really hard and not getting all those things. So we're thinking about, those are definitely things that are already in the books, but we are also thinking about adding some other themes into the next books.
Nice.
So when you're talking about your ideas for the next book, each one of these characters could have, opportunities for kids to learn about these different kinds of challenges that are lifelong challenges. We all still have to deal with them.
And the interesting thing is all of the wolves in my book, the whole wolf pack, they're all based on real children in my life. Like if you had a chance to see on social media, Kickstarter, the drawings were taken directly from real kids that I know. And, all of them have unique stories and have unique ways that they process emotions and things that they're dealing with in the world. So yeah, it would be really interesting to use them as a teaching tool, you know, for especially socially, emotionally.
Yeah, yeah. We're thinking about some ideas about just more welcoming, more acceptance of differences. And maybe part of that is how, I mean, talking about it, we're looking for talking points for families to have talking points with their kids, for for opportunities for kids to realize I'm not the only one who feels this isn't fair, or I'm not the only one who feels out of sync with other kids, or I'm not the only one who feels like they're different. So trying to get that message across in more acceptance that there's all different kinds of learners, all different kinds of interests, all different kinds of kids, and that we all have something to learn from each other, even though we're not all the same.
Absolutely. I think that universal message of, you know, that you're not alone, like we're not alone, you know what I mean? That's, you know, and that was something I touched a little bit on in the book when he missed his friends and they were all howling, like they were at their own wolf dens, but they were all howling under the same sky. Right.
I love that.
And when I read the book to groups of kids, we always stop and howl there together. You know, it's kind of like a moment of unity. But
very cute.
that I think I love that, you know, just that feeling of like we all have something to learn from each other. You know, and that no one, you know, you're not really alone, and showing up in a way of with a lens of looking at each other with empathy and kindness, right? Rather than, you know, everyone kind of being an island of themselves, which we were forced to be a little bit, right? An island of ourselves for a while. So I think both the theme of coming back together and this idea of, you know, teaching kids that they're not alone and their uniqueness brings something to the table always.
Right. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you want to share where people could contact you if they're interested in learning more about getting your book, learning more, getting in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. awolfnamedelvis.com is my website where the book can be purchased. And my email contact is on there. It's my full name, Colleen Marie Olinski @gmail.com. That's one way. And my socials are also my full name, Colleen Marie Olinski, on Instagram and also on Facebook. So those are all ways. And I'm on LinkedIn, which is how you found me.
Yeah.
And I saw it and I had to check out your website and your book. And I was like, this is so in line. Like the work that you're doing is so important and so in line and with what, you know, I want to help with and do in the world too. So I was really excited to get my hands on your book and see what you have been doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled to, in the same way, to have another person writing about the same thing, but in a very, very different way.
Yeah, and your illustrations, Joe, are so, I love the comic book feel. My son loves comic books and graphic novels, so he was drawn into that right away. And the way that the artwork, you know, as we said before, Nan, really helped to tell the story. You know, there's so much to look at and, you know, to study. You have those pages that are wordless too, and the expressions on the hypnozoids' faces and things like that, you know, really, they back up the story really well. It's a nice compliment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's I remember when I was a kid and being like so in like Batman comics, and there were so many this one artist, there were just so many like different frames that where I had to fill in the blanks, like what's going on here. There's no words. And it's kind of like just follow the action. So that's kind of like always in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, if we didn't have any words here, could I continue to drive the story without words?
Yeah.
And still convey the overall message. And so, you know, I'm always trying to put little pieces of like that into this book, and then hopefully in the future books do the same thing.
Yeah. Illustrators are amazing. Like Sydney Lander, I really feel like she took magic and made it come off the page of my book. You know, I was consistently amazed during our creation process, like with how she would take my visions and just turn them into a reality. And then, you know, as you've done, like add little things like that so that the images really tell the story as much as the words, you know. So
yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I love, sorry, what'd you say?
I said I have a huge respect for illustrators and their
Oh, I
ability to
know,
do that.
I
You
know.
know?
Yeah. It's fun having one nearby instead of all the way in Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was so interesting. Like I said, we would work before my son was up. So it was 6 a.m. my time and 6 p.m. her time. So that's how we would often meet over Zoom. But
Wow.
who would think that, across the world, that's how
Yeah.
a book could come together. That's kind
Yeah.
of the magic. That was one magic thing about the pandemic, right?
Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
I could literally work with someone across the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what you can do. Like before I started the book, I was working for a company, and we had artists in Oregon, New York, LA, and we would have a Zoom meeting with people not only on our time zone, but they were in France and Poland. And it's crazy. It was like this one big meeting, and we're across the world.
Mhm.
It was insane, but
Yeah.
it was fun too.
Yep. It's all possible now, right?
Yeah.
The limits have been taken off a lot of things. So I was grateful for that experience.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were talking about a minute ago, I wanted to get back to, we were talking about feelings and artists and how great they can portray things. Joe is creating some drawings of Joseph with all his a range of emotions. And
Nice.
we were talking about Kickstarter, and we had kicked around that idea, so to speak, also. And we're thinking about, he's drawing the pictures of Joseph and all his feelings to be posting on the internet for NFTs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I've just started learning about those.
Yeah, us too.
Yeah. It seems everybody, the last week, actually, I've been hearing everybody kind of buzzing about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think artists, especially, that is something to be educated about, learn more about, and the idea of that. Yeah, that's a great idea. Joseph and all his range of emotions. That was something I really felt Sydney did too well with emotions on the wolves' faces. I mean, Elvis, when he learns about his friends that he's not going to see them, his face is so tangible, right? That loss. I think you see it.
It is hard. I mean, that's probably one of the hardest parts. It's like, getting the right emotion, getting the right look on their faces, especially if like with Joseph, like being a real boy, it's a little bit easier, but then you working with animals, like I'm gonna have to do the same thing with Gretchen. It's like, okay, how do I do that and still make it look, but now I have a muzzle, I have a nose, I have,
Yeah, well, the magic thing about Sydney is that she had pictures of children for each of the wolves and pictures of me for Mama and my husband for Papa Wolf. So she was working with, I would send her a million pictures of each kid. So to have like, their different facial features and their emotions. And, I was like, am I sending you too many? She's like, no, keep sending them. And she really captured them. And it was one of the best joys was when the book came out to go to be able to give it to those kids that the wolves are based on, and they'd be like, that's me, and seeing themselves in the book. But yeah, it's such a gift that you have to be able to turn emotion, because the illustrations teach the children just as much as the words, sometimes more. So yeah,
it's fun.
There's a lot of kids who I work with who are very visual learners. And so that they learn through those pictures, and it's very valuable. And the words are there, but they are getting something out of it that's visual, not just the words.
And even children who are pre-readers, like who aren't reading yet, the value in just flipping through those pages and telling themselves the story, or coming up with the story, going on like a book look, we used to call it when I was a teacher, without the words, and really seeing if they can pick apart the story without hearing it.
Yeah. And lots of times when I'm reading the story to a client, on those pages in the book where there's really not any words, that's an opportunity for me to really individualize it for that child. But also it's an opportunity for me to ask the child, what do you think is happening here? And
Right.
so it leaves it very open-ended. So it makes it really great for all kinds of purposes, all kinds of lessons that can be learned, because I can make it a different story for every single kid on my caseload.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It can really tailor it to the kid and what's going on with them.
But you too, because everybody's gone through the pandemic together. So
Yes,
that's
yeah,
the
that is, it's a
lesson.
universal thing, but
Yeah.
the feelings translate, like you said, to other things.
Yeah, yeah. So if we asked about contacts for you, and
Yeah, how do we get your book? How do we find you?
yeah, the gauntlet that you saw, that information and other kinds of activities that kids can do and resources for parents to learn more about the book, more background, how to use it with their own family. That's on the website called thebadgesofpower.com. And then we're on Mission Control the Book on Instagram and Facebook, and
We have Twitter.
we do have Twitter, but I'm not even sure it might be Mission Control the Book also on that.
Yeah.
But those are the main things. Instagram is probably where we do most of the posting, and then by default, Facebook.
And
is on there
when
too.
people visit your website, you have great resources there that, like, you know, that like the printable gauntlet and the other printable items, you know, we were testing them out all week. I knew I was talking to you, so I was like, I wanted to test them out with my own son, and they're really helpful resources that, you know, a parent could download and print those and, you know, work on them right away with kids. And I really appreciated the resources that
Oh,
you all
thank
have
you.
available.
Well, that's my teacher background before I became an occupational therapist. So
Yeah.
those are all the kinds of skills that I used as a teacher as well in
And
elementary.
I'm
school.
sure you still, you know, use them in your work with,
Yeah.
with kids all the
Yeah.
time.
All the time.
So
Very
if there were takeaways that you can, you know, as an educator and an occupational therapist that you could give, you know, parents to take away today, you know, what would I love this list of things that we had kind of talked about with, like, listen, see, acknowledge, and all those steps that parents can take.
Yeah, I think that, you know, kids do go through those steps of having those big feelings and the connection in brain and body of being able to put a label to the feelings that they're having in the body, being able to identify that. So that interoception piece of knowing where do you feel it in your body, because that's the first warning sign. Like,
Yeah.
I should pay attention to what my body's telling me. I don't even need a grown-up to tell me, because I'm the one who feels it in my body first. So trying to really help kids learn about that. Most of the kids I work with can identify it in their body, and it's almost always somewhere in the head.
In the head. That was exactly when I read this with my son. You know, we reread it at a time where he did kind of need one of these books, and he did this. I said, and when it says show you where in your body, he touched his head, and that was
Very specific place too.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so
interesting.
important. And I
Yeah,
think that's something that we often wouldn't think to do with kids, like show me where you feel it in your body, or even us being aware of that when we get anxious or having.
yes, exactly. So mom recognizes right away that when she sees him do that, she probably has a feeling somewhere in her body, and automatically we want her to think, when I feel that way, I need to share my calm.
Share my calm. Yeah. And I love that it's a thinking bubble. So you know that she's internalized and she's like, okay, don't lose it. Share my calm. Yeah, that's an absolutely a great takeaway. And just the way, like you said, that she is present, you
Mhm.
know, and the same with Mama Wolf, how Mama Wolf is present with him and sits with him in his big feelings.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then she gives him the magic out of her back pocket first, right? Like, I'm going to give you this magic and I'm going to help you, but really I want you to learn how to do it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a nice way for parents and teachers to think about approaching these situations.
And I think the other piece that's valuable is that it's done in relationship with someone. So I think that really matters. So he's got that connection with his mom that
Yeah.
really helps. Kids really can't do it. I mean, we all want somebody to connect and understand us.
Right.
So kids are no different. So the mom is there, and we all want to have somebody who's there for us when
Right.
we're having those big feelings, adults
Right.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think you can take it a step further. Once you have a child has a connection and they learn how to regulate feelings themselves, they then can learn to support others. Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's like when you see kids helping other kids on the playground, or someone that's having a hard time, and that's kind of to pass that on, pass that.
Such a good point, because if they have had that themselves from their own family, then they know what it feels like. Then they
Right.
can give it away.
Right.
But if
And
they
then-
don't have those experiences because of any kinds of reasons, then it is harder for them to know what to do in other situations, show empathy, or have a tool to share with somebody else.
Right. Right. And even kids just saying, this helped me. Like, do you want to try this? Or, yeah. So I think that it's great, like teaching it and then teaching them how to pass it on as well.
Right. Some of that's sort of in our future books that we have planned.
That's great. I can't wait to see what you have up your sleeve and what's going to come out next for you all. How is it in California? We're having an ice storm here today. I
heard about that. Oh,
yes.
It's covering so much of our country right now.
Yeah, it's kind of sweeping through. Hopefully you have a little California weather there.
It's cool today, but I think in a few days it'll be like 70,
That's
72.
yeah.
We're a long way from 70.
Yeah.
We'll take it. It was -7 here the other day.
Oh,
my
ouch.
gosh.
Yeah. But so thank you. So I appreciate your time, and this was, so good to connect with you, and I appreciate the
Colleen.
work both of you are doing in the world. It's so important. And thank you for how you continue to show up for kids in this way.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure meeting with you today too. Thank you for taking the time. I'm not sure people know how to spell your last name.
Olinski, Olinski.
Great, yeah. Just like it sounds, really, but
Yes. And a wolf named Elvis.com is the name of the book. So that's also, if you get there, then
you got your name. Great. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Thank you so much.
thank you again too. Bye.
Bye.